Hi, I'm Chris, and I'm the creator of the Turkic Database. I'd like to give you a tour of this database, as well as to point out some of the newer features that I've introduced this year. If you go to the bottom of this page, you can see that I started this project in 2018. That's when I developed the web and database skills to actually create an online database. In reality, this project has been going on for much longer than that, as I've been collecting lexical information about the Turkic languages for quite some time. As of the date I'm recording this, there are over 30,000 entries in the database. I also have information about over 100 different languages, dialects, and varieties of Turkic, and 575 English words that are translated into these languages. The navigation panel up top is where you should start. Let's begin with a simple search. Simply enter the word you're interested in. Let's say we are interested in the word for shovel. Once you type in a word that actually has an entry in the database, it's provided here. You can either just hit enter or select here, and you'll see that it duplicates the word. This is simply because the database is a little bit wonky and it doesn't always provide the results that you want. So I've created this duplication of the search term as a simple key. Don't worry about it too much, just hit enter, and you'll be taken to the results page. Here in the results page, you can see that we have 46 entries, so 46 translations of the word for shovel into all of these different languages and varieties. And you can see that unlike before, if the list goes beyond 50, you have the option to show more entries, or at the bottom, you'll be prompted to select next to see the rest. On the right sidebar, we have the entry, we have translations into Russian, German, French, Farsi, and Persian, as well as information about the fact that this is on Gerhard Dorfer's list. We also have the option to export this entire thing to Excel. So if you're interested in doing some comparative work or just manipulating the data in some way, you have that option. Also in the search bar, we have these three different features. In the first, about Turkic, we have interesting information about maps and about the classification of these languages. Here in the maps page, we have a map that I created in 2024 that shows the locations of Turkic languages. I want to clarify, because there has been some debate online when I've posted this, that this is not intended to say that everyone in these areas only speaks Turkic language. In reality, most of the Turkic world is multilingual. You can see here in Eastern Turkey, there are huge populations that speak Kurdish. Most of Kazakhstan speaks Russian, and in fact, there are parts of Kazakhstan where only Russian is spoken. So this is by no means intended to say that only Turkic languages are spoken in these regions. It's just to show where they are spoken. So this is the main map. We also have a selection of pinpoint maps and interactive SVG maps. So if we click here on the Georgia Turkic ethnic groups, we can see a map of the Republic of Georgia and a variety of points, which you can select. So we see here in this large dot that in Tbilisi, there are 15,187 speakers of Azerbaijani. We can also see down here that there's quite a significant cluster of speakers of Azerbaijani bordering the western border of Azerbaijan. You can also see here near the border of Turkey that there are speakers of Turkish, or at least people who identify as ethnically Turkish. And I've also included Greek because very many of the Greek population of Georgia actually speaks a variety of Turkic. We also have some interesting SVG maps. So if we go here to languages of Bulgaria, we're taken to this SVG map of Bulgaria. Right now it's set to Bulgarian, but we could choose, for example, Turkish, and then click percentage, then submit. And we have a hoverable map that shows us that in the Ruan province of Bulgaria, 82% of the population speaks Turkish. If we hover over one of the white areas, we can see that it's less than 1%. In these maps, you can choose not only percentage, but also absolute number, because in many cases, the percentage of speakers is quite low, where the number might be quite high. And we can see here in Kırjali province that there are 31,146 speakers of Turkish, and compared to the rest of the provinces on this map, that is the highest number. We also have some feature maps. So let's say you're interested in finding out what the reflex of Proto-Turkic final ch is, and we are taking to this map that has just pinpoints showing which languages exhibit which final sound. Next up, we have the classification feature. Here we have an expandable tree that attempts to show every single Turkic variety expressed in this database, as well as some other varieties, within a tree form. The classification of Turkic is not a simple matter, simply because these languages are constantly in contact, constantly moving. And so honestly, the wave model of classification is perhaps more apt. However, tree is nice. As you can see, we can just keep expanding and expanding to see more and more. I also have some explanatory notes on how I achieved this classification. Here in the Explore the Database section, we have a number of other features. So here is where you could go to compare two different varieties. All you have to do is pick two or more. So let's say we are interested in comparing some of the northern Altai varieties. So Tubakiji, let's see, Kukiji, and let's just stop there. We click compare, and we have a full list of all of the vocabulary items for which there are entries, and you can go back and forth and compare. Just like with the search results, you can export this to Excel. So if you're interested in doing, a large-scale comparative study, this is an option. In the future, I plan to introduce an option to limit this to only the Swadesh list or the Leipzig-Jakarta list. And for the purposes of comparative linguistics, this should be quite helpful. Next up, we have the list of languages. And I do want to clarify that I take no stance on what is a language, what is a dialect, and what is just simply an interesting variety. In choosing the languages, dialects, and varieties that are represented in this database, I simply chose languages that have available data, that exhibit interesting features that differentiate them from their neighbors. And I view the distinction between a language and a dialect as a largely political one. I just care about what's interesting from a linguistic standpoint. If you've used this database before, you can see that this is laid out a little bit differently. Currently, it's set to an alphabetical listing. If you choose to navigate by family instead, all you have to do is click here, and then we have a clickable list of the variety of families that everything is grouped into. When we click through, let's say we are interested in Kazakh, we're taken to a page with some basic demographic information about the language, some references, and we can click through to see a list of all of the forms that have entries in the database, for which there are 572 for Kazakh. And as before, you can export this to Excel. Whenever you search, compare, or look at a list of entries by language, you'll notice that there is a gloss. This is the terminology that I use for the English term that is translated. There's a citation form. This is what it looks like in the dictionary or grammar that I pulled it from. And then there's a standardized form, which enables comparison. I'll talk a little bit more about my transcription system in a second. And then finally, we have the list of entries. This is the list of glosses. Again, there are 575, and expect more in the future. Currently, it's sorted alphabetically, but we could sort it thematically. And you can see here on the side that it's grouped into a large number of different categories. So if you were interested in, plants, we've got that. If you're interested in metals, we've got that. And this is useful if you're trying to reconstruct some sort of cultural history of the speakers of Turkic. So when we look at the metals, we see that there's quite a bit of commonality between pretty much all of these terms listed here. copper, gold, silver, tin, iron, and lead. And that tells us that in the earliest stages of the Proto-Turkic language, there was very likely some sort of mining or metalworking activity. So that's everything under the Explore the Database tab. Finally, we have the About the Database section. Perhaps the most important thing on this database is the list of references. I have used well over 200 references to pull this data. Tons and tons of research has been done. And if possible, I encourage you to actually try to find the actual text that I used to get this data. Again, my job here is to pull together data to make it easier to compare languages, but I do encourage you to try to find the actual books, websites, or articles that I've pulled this data from. I know it's not always possible, but again, everything here is secondhand. Try to find the primary text. As I mentioned, I have a special system of transcription that I use. This is based broadly on the Uralic phonetic alphabet. Some of it includes American phonetic notation. And you'll notice that I specifically do not use the International Phonetic Alphabet, simply because it's a bit too narrow for my purposes. Anyone who's done research into type Turkology should be familiar with this system. It's nothing revolutionary. It's quite similar to the system used by Gerhard Dorfer and most modern Turkologists. You can see here that, for example, for retroflex consonants, which aren't super common but are found in a few languages, I use the simple dot below the consonant to indicate that. So again, nothing revolutionary here. I also have a breakdown of the system of vowels that I use, a few other symbols. And then further below, I do talk a bit about the notation used by Gerhard Dorfer. For the most part, I simply take what he has used and dump it into the transcribed portion of the table, simply because it's so similar to the system that I use that there's no need to really change it. I do find it fun looking at his system of transcription and the way he breaks down vowels. Here's an example of how he breaks down vowels as a tetrahedron, and here's an example of how he breaks them down as a cube. So quite unusual. And then finally, I break down the system used in Wilhelm Friedrich Radloff's Versuch eines Wörterbuches des Türkdialekte, which uses a system of Cyrillic transcription that is pretty confusing. So I've broken it down here to assist anyone who might be pulling data from that book. I have a few special pages that don't really belong anywhere. So I have a guide to using Dorfer's works that goes beyond just his transcription. Same with Radloff. I have a discussion of the history of the Turkic languages in Crimea. I use the Missing Forms tool to simply see what entries I need to look up for a given language. And then I also have an archive, so if you are fond of the previous look of the site, you can feel free to use that. And then finally, I have an update blog. So if you're interested in knowing what's going on, what I've been up to, and what changes have been made, simply go to this update blog. You can add it to your favorite feed reader, and you can see what's going on. So please feel free to get in touch with me. The email address on the main website, chris@elegantlexicon.com, is the best way to get in touch. If you have any questions, recommendations for additions, or simply want to discuss the workings of this database with me. Stay tuned, because I'm very likely to introduce new entries on a regular basis, and I'll potentially be adding some new features.